So I have a few questions because I have kids that are both in 11th and 8th grade. So I have two for you. One is I'd like to, what's your assessment of what kind of support and education is being done for the teachers? Because we're seeing kind of on the ground as parents a very mixed result in terms of this kind of first and second year rollout of this. That's one question. Another question is if you could just speak a bit more about the AP US history, because in our district, like everything has been thrown off. Our teachers are having to slow down on their AP exam preparation because they're saying that things are changing. So DBQs and other things they're not doing right now because they have to. So a lot of us don't even understand what's going on.
For the first part about what we can do for teachers is provide, yeah, we're struggling with that too, is provide the time necessary to redesign fundamentally a classroom. And that's hard. It's time and supports. And again, a lot of our teachers are begging, give us the binder. You know, for years they said, quit telling us what to do. And now all of a sudden it's like, please tell us what to do. Because the change has been so radical. So I wish schools could provide us more time and more, I don't want to say I'm an expert by any stretch, but the supports on a one-to-one basis. Because I work best with my colleagues when it's just them and I. And we can sit down for an hour and go through a particular area of study they're working on, and I can sort of provide supports and then go off. I have a little time to go find some resources for them to help. So that sort of support's necessary. As for the U.S. history, it's a different test. And so what the teachers typically, went through the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and would go through that progression in a pretty quick pace, oftentimes very teacher-centered, the test is going to be very different. It's much more thematic and it's much more interpretive. And so teachers are struggling to figure out how to make that transition so that it's still a history class with good, rich content, but also reflective of the new demands that the test is going to take. Individual teachers are, going to make different decisions on that. I don't know. There's a lot, it's a lot less top-down, it seems, in a lot of districts, and so teachers are sort of now on their own, which does create some inconsistency, I think. Yeah, that's something that the individual sites are going to have to work on. Our group, we have a single district high school, or a single high school district, excuse me, and so we're able to work together really well because we can meet at lunch after school, we're close. Bigger districts, it's going to be tougher. Where do your kids go? Yeah, please.
Let me just answer to that too. Nikki is a trainer for Common Core, and she can talk a little bit about the rollout of the training.
So in LA Unified, it's been, implementation always has its issues. A lot of us Common Core facilitators have been hired to go and do professional development, and we were doing weekly trainings where teachers would come to us and we would teach them about Common Core. Last year they had these Common Core modules that they got to use. I was out of LA Unified for a few years, so I kind of missed that, and then I came back to being a facilitator. So it's been, I work in ISIC, which is the Intensive Support and Innovation part of LA Unified. So I have less schools. I only have 5 schools that I support, so I can go there and I can do teacher meetings and I can do a lot of professional development. But in other parts of LA Unified, some facilitators have 18 schools. So it's a lot. So of course, it's like, where are we putting our money and our resources? This is a huge change for teachers, and they need support. And are they getting the support they need? Probably not as much as they should be. But that's the way everything is with our society. We jump into something and then we don't provide resources. Exactly.
In my lifetime, I've seen things come and go, fads, Why Johnny Can't Read, Sputnik, New Math, Phonics, Whole Language. Now Common Core is the latest thing rolled out. Just give me your guesstimate. 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years. What would be a good, quote, college try for Common Core? At which point we would revisit it, and if it didn't make significant progress in changing things, we should reevaluate it or even look for something new. which, maybe hasn't even developed yet. Give me your sense of what's a good college try for this. Because I've mentioned about 6 of these in my lifetime, each lasting maybe 5-10 years. Give me a date in which you would feel comfortable determining if it's working or not, or perhaps even phased out. Give me a date.
I mean, I don't know the date, but I do think that Common Core is here for a while. It's because they are new standards, and the old standards were around for a long time, so I feel like these are going to be around for a while. I don't feel like it's just going to be a 5-year thing. I think it's going to be definitely, when my kid going to college, for sure. His kids going to college, I don't know if it'll be around that long, and maybe it shouldn't be because we'll know more then. So we should always be changing and growing. That's my best answer.
I'm going to answer that. Let me answer first. I think that it depends on how many states pull out of the Common Core. A lot of states are having issues with it, having issues with the rollout, and I think there's been at least 2 or 3 that I've heard of just this week that are threatening pulling out. Whether or not it's going to be kind of a blue state thing, which seems like it might be, that remains to be seen. I think what Common Core is going toward, some kind of form of it, is going to be with us. It's going to have more, we're going to have more technology. We're going to have more integration. We're going to, like Kevin said, we're living in a society now where we have information in our palm of our hands. We're not going to be teaching that style of education anymore. So we're going to need to have those critical thinking skills emphasized. So it'll be in some kind of form like it is now. Right. Well, it's interesting because Bill Gates, as you know, is a Republican. But it seems like it's gotten more buy-in from blue states than it has from red states. Like Texas and Alaska didn't even sign on. They were very upfront that we don't want to be told what to do. We're states' rights oriented. We don't want a national curriculum. It may also have to do with, like I said, those science standards. Believe it or not, science is a major point of contention. They want that creation science taught alongside evolution, and that's a big, big, big issue, as is this idea that if it's international, that it's going to be socialist. So it's important to realize that Bill Gates is kind of an internationalist. He's not a socialist, but they're lumping him in with those reformers that are socialists. So it's kind of like Common Core is in the middle, if you will.
June 17th, 2026. Why? Because that's my anticipated retirement date. But seriously, I think Nikki's right. I think we're moving, and we're never going to go back. Besides those folks that still want to read McGuffey's Readers, but the world's changed, and I talk to my colleagues. I said we have to as educators. Now I'm talking about as a I'm a part of my local. I'm an executive board member of my local, and I tell my folks we got to change. We have tremendous pressures, not only from private schools and charters, but from technology. There's online schools now that can give a child a K through 12 degree, and if a parent chooses to do that, that's one less kid in a seat in my classroom. We can become very much unnecessary if we don't figure out what we need to do to be relevant. So we're, whether it's the structure of Common Core per se as we move forward, who knows? Like Maureen said, lots of states may drop out. Some are already dropping out of the testing system. But I think this notion of changing away from rote memorization and that kind of stuff towards a more analytical schooling is going to be there. Now, let me point out, Diane Ravitch has a review out in the most recent New York Review of Books edition. She reviews a book by an Oregon University professor who's a Chinese-American guy. And he says, America, don't do it. Don't follow the Chinese model. Don't listen to Bill Gates when it comes to this notion of norming our math scores where we're like the lowest in the world and they're, China, Singapore, Korea, Japan are all the top at the top. He says that's not the way to go because, well, he lays out a very broad argument, which I haven't had a chance to read the book on, but one of the things he points out is, when's the last time anybody from China got a Nobel Prize? And where are they coming from? American, European universities, because that's where innovation and critical thinking and creativity, not rote memorization that's conforming We are trying to innovate. And so as long as we hold on to the innovative side, I think we're going to be in good shape. We'll adjust. This is going to look differently in 5 years, just as the CSTs did.
Beginning phase of implementation, and we didn't have a tweaking because Bill Gates and his money pushed it forward. But these standards will be tweaked.
I'm confused as to how this now interfaces with what's been going on in the public schools. Will there be report cards? Will there be promotion? Will there be diplomas? Will there be a time schedule? And if so, it seems to me that this is appealing to the more affluent, thereby swinging the pendulum of education away from what it has developed in recent modern times, going back to when education was highly elitist, where only the very rich would have an education, and of course the poor masses screw them. And this seems to be even a greater force for dropout, for total segregation, unlike what we knew, 40, 50 years ago.
I don't know how to answer that big question. There's still going to be report cards. There's still going to be diplomas and graduation. Some of the requirements for that may be changing over time, which they normally do. I know that some teachers at my site are trying to realign their assessments to Common Core specific skills. So instead of having a Chapter 1 test, they're going to have components in their grade book related to critical thinking, analysis, use of evidence, speaking, listening, etc. So they're trying to realign what it is we measure students by to line up with these standards. So I think that's a good development. I think that's really, what's an A?
There will be A's and there'll be F's.
Oh, yes.
But reflective, hopefully, of this broader alignment of skills, more carefully articulated.
To answer your question, too, I think it is elitist to a point. I mean, I think they're trying their best to try to level the playing field, but what's happening internationally is America is slipping in its ranking, and I think it's creating a lot of anxiety, and there's a lot of going on in the economy, as you know, and there's a lot of blame going on. Who's to blame for the economy tanking? And I think this is the recent blame that it's somehow our educational system. What's happening is globalization is happening. And those societies that are more homogeneous and who have more buy-in, and like Singapore, for instance, Singapore is very high ranking in terms of the scores, the international assessments. And they are pretty much a middle class and above society. Finland, these kind of countries. And, United States is doing very well considering that we have as many immigrants as we do, we have the diversity we do. And I think we need to understand our strength is not to compete with Asia, but to be who we are, which is to be diverse and to be creative and to find solutions to problems. And I think it's a mistake for Bill Gates, and you saw in the video, he's very much chasing after Asia. And I do think that's a mistake. Before we go on, Nikki has to leave, so if there's any questions specifically for Nikki, she's going to answer them now.
I think it might apply to her. Okay. Schools were never designed to take over 100% of education, by which I mean parents need to be involved. So to get very specific in relation to this, what do we as parents need to expect that our involvement needs to be with our children in relation to Common Core? Where do we need to supplement? How do we need to reinforce?
I think the best thing you can do is always ask your kids to explain their thinking. So if they're reading to you at night, and start asking them some questions about, well, why did that happen? Why do you think the author, you could, be irritating like me. Well, why do you think the author chose that? And why do you think that? And what's the evidence? So a lot of times, and I don't know if you do this as a parent, but parents might, can say like, well, what do you think is going to happen next? So if you're asking what your kid's prediction is, don't just accept, oh, I think, so-and-so is going to do this. Well, what makes you think that? What happened in the story that makes you think that? So that's one follow-up question. And math also. So explain their thinking. So for example, I'm always doing this. Well, first of all, play Monopoly. It is so good for numbers since we've been, my third grader is like a whiz at Monopoly, and we have Mega Monopoly, and they start with $2,500, and they have skyscrapers. So I would say, anything that reinforces number sense, because if they have that really quick numeracy, that's going to really serve them well. But I always say to him, how do you know that? How'd you figure that out? So just asking those follow-up questions about explaining thinking, that really gets to kind of the core of Common Core, being able to cite evidence and explain thinking. Yes?
My question is completely in line with this. My son's also in third grade, and he goes to a school that's been doing Common Core since he got there. However, since you said they rolled it out so quickly, the parents weren't really trained in how to deal with it. His math homework comes home sometimes, and for example, like to add, a number plus a number that has more than, like 265 plus 371. My son cannot do it the way we did it, where you carry the one and you do this and you do this. So that's fine. They teach him a different way at school. However, he comes home and he doesn't understand it. And I don't know how to explain it to him the way the teachers explained it at school because I wasn't there. And so what I end up doing, it's 8 o'clock at night, he's got to go to bed, he's got, 2 pages of this. I say, let me show you how I do it. And we revert back to the old method. A lot of times also, they'll say at the very bottom of the worksheet, of the Common Core worksheet, it'll say, explain your answer. And my son says, because it is. Or this and this plus this and this equals this. And that's his answer. And so I think, I love the idea of creative thinking. I love the idea of understanding process. But sometimes developmentally, I don't think that they're there. And I don't think they're ready. And they're not articulate enough, or they don't have the verbal skills, but they shouldn't get it wrong.
Well, okay.
And they're getting it wrong.
So one of the things, it sounds like there's 2 issues. One, it sounds like you have to have a conversation with your kid's teacher and about, I need help with this. So teachers need to be able to, at my son's school, where I used to work there, we would send home like all the different ways, all the different strategies you could use to solve the problem. So they had that in hand for the parents. Okay, so that's one thing. It's having a conversation with your child's teacher or having a conversation with the principal of your school and say, we need some training on this. At my son's school also, they're doing some math training for parents. So that's one piece. The other thing is no, this is so schools. No, it's not. It shouldn't cost money. It's just if teachers want to, you should. Right. Well, a lot of schools have things like math night, and yes, you're right. It depends on if you could pay teachers to do it, that would be better for sure. But I'd just say have a conversation with the principal to see what are the options. And the second point is that I actually disagree with you on when you say like if they just add it up and that shows that he knows what he's doing. The whole point of Common Core math is for them to understand the concept. It's all developing that conceptual understanding. So if he knows that, interesting that they put it that way. So like in my son's school, it might say 365 plus 298, but it's horizontal instead of vertical because of course you want to, when you're stacking like that, you're going to carry and borrow. That's not called, it's called regrouping now. So which is what it is, because when you think of like tens and ones, that's what you're doing. You're regrouping some ones to make a 10. So understanding the concept of that is what is going to serve your son better. Okay, but yes. I think, he gets the answer, but he gets it without understanding the concept, so that would worry me because he doesn't understand the concept. So when he gets older, it's going to get more and more challenging. In my mind, he'll be more successful if he really gets that concept. I know, we did. But when you look at, yes, we do, but we're also, when you're looking at the global economy and when you're competing with everything else that's going on, and you are competing with Asia, when you look at, I went to this great math training called Cognitively Guided Instruction, CGI, and it's out of UCLA. And what they said was that the reason that when you look at all these countries that are successful in math, the one common piece, it's not about whether or not, they're doing cooperative groups. It's not about whether or not the teacher's lecturing. The only common thread is that there's struggle, productive struggle. So the kids, it's in the States, the way we teach is like, oh, we're learning multiplication. So this is what multiplication is. I'm gonna show you how to do it. You're gonna practice, and now you got multiplication. But in the countries that are more successful in math, they'll just give a word problem, and they'll say, figure it out. And they use all their conceptual understanding, like my son does. He's figured out that multiplication, even though they haven't even taught it in school yet, he's figured out that it means groups of things. So he can skip count, he can figure it out, and there's no right answer. So the fact that your son is solving it and getting the right answer, that's one way to solve it. I would never say he was wrong. But as his teacher, I would push him to show his thinking, because it's going to serve him better with the way we're moving. And on Smarter Balance, which unfortunately that's the way the world is that we get judged by testing. I don't support that, but that's the way it is. With Smarter Balance, if he cannot show his thinking, he will not do well. So, that's just one. Yeah.
Okay, we got to wrap it up, right? Yeah, no. Okay. Oh, I think we have one more. We have really. Okay, we've got room for about 2 more questions. So, yeah.
That was one thing I wanted to talk about, the math, because we're in my neighborhood or at my school, there's not a lot of people believing in creationism or want that taught, but it's all about the math, and that it's all so confusing and all that. But I want to say that my child's principal said that the Khan Academy actually has some great videos on. She said the parents are having problems. No, I'm saying for the parents to understand the new way to do it, to actually look it up on that. Khan, Khan, Khan Academy. So thank you.
I'm thrilled that the CSTs are no longer part of our world. But I'm curious, the new test that's in the 11th grade, are schools still penalized or rewarded based on the results? Yes, absolutely. So even...
It hasn't been fully defined what the new accountability regime is going to be, but the SBAC testing will be a component. But it's also going to be some other newer, less numeric issues. And again, this is all getting worked out, so we'll find out the minute the state releases it.
I was told in my district that it will count this year. And I just want to talk to the parent with a 3rd grade child, teach 3rd grade. You're not alone. The teachers are struggling too. So just so you know that it's a learning process, engage New York. I can't say it enough. Look it up. Oh, you weren't here for the PowerPoint? Okay, https:// it's www. Yeah, engagenewyork.org. It has every single lesson that your child will have in this classroom. Yes. Yes.
I just wonder about the uniformity of teaching, and we are going through, each student is different, and it seems to be much more, this Common Core, much more uniform and a little less that this is an individual who has a different way of learning. That's a concern. The other concern is I know that it might be good in certain things like the sciences and maths and so forth, but I'm wondering if the emphasis has been taken away again from the social aspects of whether it be sociology or whether it be art or whether it be some sort of creative juice that stimulates that area of the mind. Like I know that we have to compete because that's just the nature of the way that the world works, but I'm also wondering if this makes it so that you become a cog in the wheel of industry when you graduate.
Well, all basic educational movements are cog and wheels. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of the beast. We did go through some reforms of the 60s and into the 90s where it was more student-centered, more creative. Whole language was a part of that. And then, of course, we had that problem with kids who didn't have phonics. And so that was a component that was missing. And then that really led to us looking into what was wrong and kind of the conservatives used that, and I'm getting political here because it is political, and they threw the baby with the bathwater out, essentially, which is child-centered curriculum, whole language, it's all connected together. And now what we're doing is, with No Child Left Behind, they threw it all out. Everything. So we were back to literally rows like it used to be in the progressive era, and the teacher in the front, and kids not working in groups, and teaching to the test, the CST. And Common Core is really a middle of the road. And by middle of the road is they're getting back to talking about creative thinking, but creativity as you've defined it, it's not there. I mean, it's not quite there. It's there in terms of analytical creativity and explaining your answers, but it's not there in terms of like creating works of art or analyzing literature or any of those kinds of things. And that is a component of Common Core that I think needs to be tweaked. And I don't want to throw Common Core out like the baby with the bathwater. Let's keep what's good about it, and let's add to it. Because America, like, go back to the United States and who we are innovators. And I think it's a mistake to just be completely standards-based, and we lose that individuality that made our country what it is.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up. I want to thank our presenters for doing a great job. It was a wonderful presentation.